Have you ever asked yourself how to navigate the stormy seas of grief and loss? It's a question that echoes in the hearts of many, a universal experience that ties us together in our shared humanity. Grief, loss, these are feelings that don't discriminate. They come knocking at the doors of our souls, uninvited, demanding to be felt, and often leaving us feeling lost and overwhelmed. How do we process these profound emotions? How do we weather the storm and come out on the other side, stronger, wiser, and perhaps even more compassionate? It's a journey that's as unique as each one of us, yet there are common threads that bind our experiences together, pathways through the wilderness of loss that others have tread before us. The difficulty, however, lies in our understanding of grief. It's not something to be conquered or dismissed, but rather something to be acknowledged and understood. Understanding the process of grieving can be an empowering first step in healing. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, a Swiss-American psychiatrist, proposed a model that breaks down the process of grieving into 5 stages. This model, often referred to as the Kübler-Ross model, has served as a guide for millions grappling with loss and grief. The first stage is denial. This is the initial shock or disbelief where we might find ourselves thinking, "This can't be happening." It's a defense mechanism that buffers the immediate shock of the loss, numbing us to our emotions. Next comes anger. As the masking effects of denial start to wear off, reality and its pain re-emerge. We're not ready and we redirect our pain and hurt. We might ask, "Why me? It's not fair," or "Who is to blame?" Bargaining follows anger. In an attempt to regain control, we might find ourselves making deals with a higher power, with fate, or even with the person we've lost. We may think, "If only I had done this differently, they would still be here." Depression, the 4th stage, is a sort of quiet sadness. It's when we start to understand the magnitude of the loss, and it seems overwhelming. We might feel empty, with emotions that range from mild sadness to deep despair. The final stage is acceptance. This isn't about being okay with the loss, but rather coming to understand the permanence of it. It's about recognizing that we need to move forward and figuring out how to do so. However, it's essential to remember that these stages are not a linear progression. Everyone experiences them differently. Some might not experience all stages, and others might circle back to stages they've already moved through. The process of grief is unique to each individual and each loss. Whether you're experiencing these stages yourself or supporting someone who is, it's important to approach the process with empathy, patience, and understanding. Remember, it's not a race, but a journey that takes time and patience. Denial often serves as a buffer to the immediate shock of the loss. It's like a safety blanket, gently cushioning the blow of reality. It's not unusual for us to initially refuse to accept a painful or uncomfortable truth. This is the stage of denial in the grieving process. Denial and isolation go hand in hand. When we face a loss, we may find ourselves retreating into a shell, walling ourselves off from the world. It's like we're trying to hold back the tide of emotions, threatening to overwhelm us. This isolation isn't just physical. It can also be emotional as we distance ourselves from our feelings, refusing to acknowledge the pain. So, how does denial serve us? It's a defense mechanism, a survival instinct. It gives us time to absorb and gradually process the loss. We mustn't see denial as something negative. Instead, it's a part of healing, a step on the journey towards acceptance. But how do we recognize this stage? Look for signs of disbelief, a sense of numbness, or a feeling that what's happened is just a bad dream. These are all indicators that you're in the denial phase. Remember, it's okay to be in denial, it's okay to isolate, but also remember this is just a stage, a part of the process, it's not a place to stay. In denying, we buffer the sudden impact of the loss, allowing us to collect ourselves for the journey ahead. Anger can be a bridge out of the sea of denial and into more active stages of grief. We're now delving into the next stages of grief, anger and bargaining. Understand that these are not fixed, sequential stages, but fluid phases that can overlap or be revisited. So let's talk about anger. It's a powerful emotion that can surge through us like a torrent, leaving us feeling overwhelmed and lost. Anger can be directed outwardly at others or inwardly at ourselves. You may find yourself seething at the unfairness of your loss or blaming others for not preventing it. You may even direct this anger towards the person you've lost, which can be a confusing and guilt-inducing experience. But remember, it's okay to be angry. Your anger is a natural response to your pain and a sign that you're moving through your grief. It's a sign that you're grappling with the reality of your loss, that you're acknowledging the depth of your pain. Now, let's move on to bargaining, another common stage of grief. Bargaining often involves guilt. You might find yourself replaying scenarios in your mind, imagining different outcomes. What if I had done this differently? What if I had been there? These what-if scenarios can consume us as we desperately try to negotiate away our pain. However, bargaining is also a part of the healing process. It's a way for us to regain control in a situation where we feel helpless. It's a way for us to make sense of our loss, to process our emotions, and to come to terms with our new reality. Remember, while these stages of grief can be intensely painful, they're also indicative of healing. They signal that you're actively working through your grief, that you're allowing yourself to feel, to hurt, to heal. So give yourself permission to be angry, to bargain, to question. It's all part of the journey towards healing. Anger, while challenging, can be a sign that healing is happening. Depression and acceptance are often the most misunderstood stages of grief. Depression, in the context of grief, is not a sign of mental illness. It's a natural response to the current situation, a profound sadness that engulfs us when we fully realize the impact of our loss. It's like a thick fog that shrouds our existence, making everything seem bleak and colorless. We may feel numb, lethargic, and find it hard to carry out everyday tasks, but it's important to recognize that this is a normal part of the grieving process. In this stage, we may find ourselves withdrawing from life, isolating ourselves, and wondering if there's any point in going on alone. It's crucial to understand that this depression is not a sign of being mentally ill. It's an appropriate response to a great loss. We may be tempted to fast forward through this stage to avoid the discomfort it brings, but rushing through or sidestepping it only delays the inevitable need to confront these feelings. Remember, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel this sadness, to let it wash over you. It's okay to grieve. And then there's acceptance. Acceptance, contrary to popular belief, doesn't mean we're okay with the loss. It doesn't mean we've moved on or forgotten about the person we've lost. Acceptance simply means acknowledging the reality that our loved one is physically gone and recognizing that this new reality is the permanent reality. We will never like this reality or make it okay, but eventually we accept it. We learn to live with it. It's like learning to live with a scar. The scar remains as a reminder of the wound, but we learn to live with it, to accommodate it into our lives. As we navigate through depression and acceptance, it's vital to remember that grief is not linear, and we may oscillate between these stages. And that's okay, it's all part of the journey. Acceptance is not about forgetting, it's about learning to live with the new reality. Grief is a journey, a road often marked by pain, but also by growth and understanding. Today we've delved into the realm of grief, its stages, and how it affects each of us differently. We began by unveiling the veil of grief, acknowledging its presence in our lives and understanding that it's a natural response to loss. We then explored the 5 stages of grief as proposed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. These stages, while sequential in theory, are often experienced in a non-linear fashion in reality. We navigated the phase of denial and isolation, where we often refuse to accept the reality of loss, followed by anger and bargaining, where we tried to negotiate our way out of the pain. Understanding these stages is crucial to acknowledging our feelings and giving ourselves the permission to grieve. We then moved on to the stages of depression and acceptance. Dealing with depression involves processing the intense sadness that follows loss. Acceptance, on the other hand, doesn't mean forgetting or moving on. It signifies acknowledging the reality of the loss and learning to live with it. Each of us grieves differently, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, and there's certainly no set timeline. The important thing is to allow ourselves to feel, to grieve, and to heal in our own time. Remember, grieving is not about moving on, but moving forward with the memory of the loss we carry.